Hey world, hey Munich, so good to be here. Thanks for tuning in once again. This is the second part of our business process management to AI to scaling section. We have figured out that there is a huge noise to signal ratio in all things business process management and all things AI. What can you do with it? And what is actually a solid foundation to think about business processes, to think about how can I automate some actions, what is agentic behavior. So there's a lot of YouTube videos and social media out there. We wanted to come down to some factual groundwork in order to make it easier for you moving forward to check out what is your business process, then move on to maybe digitizing that process, and then see how AI can augment or enable that process, and maybe even go further so that you can fully automate it, be extremely flexible. And there are tools and skill sets for that. The skill set is becoming easier by the day. And the tools also, the handling of such, become easier by the day. And so I'm Jan. I am your host, as always, director of the Founders Fight Club. We are here in the home base of Preparis, Munich. I'm sitting here with Captain Future of Preparis in Munich, live on site. We actually also have two guests joining us here today, so it's a massive crowd. But I'm sure online lots of people are watching as well. And so Chris, we're going to have you starting off in a minute with how to digitize processes. What's a solid foundation to digitize a process? Last week, actually not last week, but last time we checked in on how do you design processes. So you're moving this into how to digitize those processes. Then Dave, you are going to be taking over and telling us how to scale digital processes. You have a great example that you brought with us from an actual project where you scaled a train-the-trainer process across several levels. So that's going to be fascinating. And then we have to come to the AI section of things. And Bryce is going to be so kind and lead us through the tool set that is needed to actually get AI on the job and make those processes even smarter. Chris, did I sum that up correctly? Anything else to add?
Basically, maybe I will talk about the details later. Yeah.
Wonderful. Gentlemen, maybe just a quick question for your own introduction. Where are you based right now, and what's the weather like where you are? Dave, starting with you.
Dave Bayless with Humans Got Business in Bozeman, Montana. And it's cloudy and about 11 degrees. Spring hasn't arrived.
Well, we'll send over some sun from Munich. Bryce, where are you? How's life there, and how's the weather?
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be here. I am here in Nashville, Tennessee, in the States, and it is gorgeous outside. So I'll probably work out there a little bit later today. Nice and sunny.
That sounds great. But before we get to the fun parts in the sun, let's learn some things. And we're going to be starting things over here. I'll be leaving in a sec, and I'll also take off Bryce and Dave. And then we're going to get started. I'll be sharing my screen so Chris can take over. Gents, thank you so much. We're going to see you again in just a sec. And now let me share our screen over here. Here we are. And there we have that fascinating mirror effect. So let's get into full screen mode of the presentation. And there you are. All yours, Chris. Have fun.
Right. Thank you. So I thought about how I could give some different value to this kind of presentation, because I saw the previous presentation, and it's more like how to build systems, how to make them probably right. And what I tried to give you today is a real world example from one of our customers. So a project we really did. So it's a huge one. So it's more like a higher level view. So I don't want to get boring stuff like too deep API things. So it's more like a top level view, and maybe some parts are under NDA. So I try to give my best to give you enough insights, but we will see. Okay, let's get started. So At first, when we starting this project, and in general, when we are starting projects, more like the facing of the status quo. It sounds obvious, but in most cases, and this is the true story, is customers already have digital processes. So it's not like you are getting there and you have pen and paper or something like that. So that's maybe in the 90s, but from now on, you already have a running system. They are earning their money with it, and they have some kind of needs. And first of all, we need to understand the problem. So maybe that's not the right order there, but first, of course, you do understand the problem or need to understand the problem. And then it's something like the definition of entities. So that's the next point that's maybe obvious, but at this certain customer, it's more like they are talking about doors, and of course you know what a door is, but he has a different definition for a door. So maybe people are entering or something like that. So that's the first step. Of course, we do a lot of workshops and so on, blah, blah. And then you need to examine and maybe understand the legacy systems they already have. So they are not there for the first time. So they got old system, maybe new system. There's every kind of system already out there. And so it's an illusion to say you install a system there and say you make everything from ground up new. This will not happen. It will never happen if you ask me. So it's just too huge. So, and if you do that, by the way, you will miss the lessons learned step by step. So changing a whole set of processes is, for me, it's very important to say, let's change something and then maybe more, and then do a lessons learned, something like that. And the last one, do not hurt feelings or hurt feelings. I don't care anymore. Maybe you know this British comedian who made a roast at the Globes, I think. And yeah, that's something like the customer shouldn't be happy. Maybe that's not the wrong explanation, the right explanation. Maybe it's more like you need to put the finger into the wound and say, okay, this is bad, and maybe you hurt feelings, and I don't care. So a real life example I promised, and here it is. The project was, it sounds simple at first, so implement a new profile for visitors that enables them to log in into each already present front end and allow them to edit and view their data. It's a classical SSO system. The challenge, if you think of a challenge, is that they already had an up and running system, of course, with earning money, and they have 1.5 million existing accounts all over the world. And the first problem is they don't even knew which of these accounts were really active accounts, old accounts, obsolete accounts, the whole stack. But you can't go there and say, okay, let's delete all. So you need to figure out which accounts were active and so on and so on. The next thing, of course, is modernizing the existing architecture and implement a modern approach, because the mission was, okay, when they change something on their system, they want an approach that lasts for the next years. And the old system and the business process should be replaced over time, adapting the new architecture, of course. So we need this step-by-step approach. And they had a huge performance and resilience problem. So this was the next fun part of it. So how do you face this? So first of all, the status quo. They had huge systems, SAP, Oracle, SQL Server, WordPress, Comedia CMS, the whole stack. And this is for a hardcore technician like me, maybe one of the baddest point. These huge systems should be the single point of truth, so they have the data sovereignty. So it's not allowed to put data aggregated into a database in front. So it's more like if they change something in SAP, of course, they want that it's true for all business processes related. And these huge systems are not made for that. If you ask me, it's more like they are slow. They are not able to handle 1 million requests or something. So, and they cannot scale per definition because it's so costly. Everyone who owns SAP knows what I'm talking about. So yeah, so what's the solution to this? I will now give you some high-level view of this architecture. So I'm not quite happy with this image at all, because it's a little bit wrong, because the business process to the left might exist on the global API as well. So what we did is we did a cluster of microservices that lie behind a global access area, if you want it like that. So you don't see which microservice you're accessing. So we installed a huge amount of microservices for the scaling factor, but I will zoom in later. And to the right, you see the legacy systems, or not legacy, let's say the huge systems, SAP, CMS system, their old account SSO, and so on and so on. So I will dig in a little bit now. So data aggregation. The first thing to handle this is that each process related should only use this global API. So, and the global API handles the aggregation of the data. So it asks maybe SAP. So let's think of, get me a list of all customers. And all customers might be a huge number. And we are talking about addresses, account data, maybe passwords somehow. And so, but every business process has this challenge. So the global API handles that. So in the background, the global API collects the data, makes one single data set out of it, and returns it. So every business process has the same API. And it may come from different systems. So the sovereignty is at the system. So now we are facing the problem that SAP may be slow and talking about performance. So our approach was we put some uniform API, we are calling it like that, in front of SAP. Why we are doing that? So at first, with proxy in this case, is SAP is slow. So to handle a huge amount of data, you need some kind of API in front that is fast. So this API is able to handle a huge amount of requests, and if it faces that SAP is maybe down or something, then it returns its collected proxy data at the end. So the business process is really connected to SAP, but the data sovereignty is still at SAP. So, and if a business process wants to write data at the end, it's again in this proxy-like manner, and if SAP is down, it just collects the data in a FIFO-like queue. And if SAP is back online, it just sends it later. So the global API acts as well as some kind of bus. If you're from the automotive industry, you can maybe think of something like a CAN bus system like that. So every business process just connects to this message like bus and just listens. So there's no need for polling or something, which is, again, for performance, not very good. And if, let's say, a visitor is entering, this may be an event. Some business processes may be interested if a visitor is entering, some not. So it's just like catching the things that are interesting for this particular business process at this point. The next thing is scalability. So the global API is made out of a huge amount of microservices, and that makes it fully horizontally scalable, of course. So you can throw your money on it. So if you want a faster system, just spend your money. And you don't need to invest into programming skills or something. So you can just scale it up. And every service can run everywhere, because some services may run in the cloud. Some services may run virtualized on a virtual system. I don't know, I don't care. And the load balancer in front normally just controls the load and distribute traffic, or the whole thing. So flexibility. And this was a crucial one, because, of course, if you change the system step by step, you can't adapt every new business process or every old business process on this platform. So the old business process still is talking to SAP like it did before. And that's totally fine for us, because only new business processes just use the global API with the uniform API in front. So we don't care. So it's just working. And if you see, okay, this is working out good, then you just transform the old business process into the new one, and you can just replace it. We did this in this particular case, as you might see in the last point. The old account system was LDAP based. So the 1.5 million accounts were all stored in an LDAP-like interface. So what we did was that we faked this. So we built our new system, but built an LDAP interface to it, so that old business processes didn't realize they're already talking to the new one. but we could have a single point in data sovereignty there and collect very important data, which accounts are really accessed. So you could identify which of these accounts were old or new or something, and then you could drop them after that, because not all of these 1.5 million were active anymore. Talking about security. So the global API is split up, well, can be split up into two sections, intranet, private, and public, of course. So it's more like a definition what you want. So some use cases need a global API, like external companies are accessing it. That's totally fine. So you put some of the microservices and parts of the global API to the public. They can talk to the internal API if you want to, but you don't need to. It's more like a private or security manner, but it's totally flexible at the end. Response times, yeah. So the customer had a lot of offices around the world and had two SAP systems, not only one. And one was in Hong Kong and one in Germany. So at the first try, and we accessed the API from Hong Kong and vice versa, it was really amazingly slow. So you had access times about just response times of 4 or 5 seconds, or sometimes 10 seconds, because just infrastructure was that far away. And so what we did is we mapped the API and the microservice to Hong Kong, and they can talk to each other, of course, maybe in the night where performance or response times doesn't matter. You don't know. It doesn't, I don't care, because the business process, if you are sitting in Hong Kong, is a different one maybe than in Germany, and vice versa. And of course, you have this data protection thing that maybe you don't want to share your user data with different countries. So it was an important point that it's somehow split it. But they should talk to each other, and you don't want to develop it twice. And yeah, that's what we did at the end. We split it up into two sections, but the global API masked it. So it's more like, and I'm not sure how it's technically done at this point, I must be honest, but it's fully transparent. So you don't get it where you get the call and where it's led. So talking about costs, why do we do a uniform API in front of a standard product like SAP? They got SAP PI, of course, and all these tools. But the problem in general is, if you take a standard product, it has a standard API. And if you want to change it, it's expensive. So what we did is we just built up a uniform API in front with this proxy, of course, because of performance. But this leads us to that if you want to change the product, okay, maybe SAP is not that great example, but think of a CMS system, something like that, then you just change the uniform API, or need to change the uniform API, because it's just like adapting the product, and you don't need to touch any business process at all. It's just magically happens if the API is at a certain point where it's really possible, but normally it is. So this is a huge cost factor, of course, because otherwise, like the old business processes were integrated, it was more like very specialized to SAP, or very specialized to Oracle, and so on and so on. Yeah, so the upcoming applications or business process just use the global API, so no further development. What does that mean? Because what we faced was that very few or very much business process had the same thing to do. So it's more like get visitor, get number of doors, something like that. So it was all the same task. So the global API at the end, if you develop something at this point, it's shared between all. So you can really decrease the development cost there. And if you do and need a new business process, every application can use it because of the global API. Yeah. I think I rocked it in about 6 minutes. So let's see.
Thanks, Chris. Good work. Now, let me get back in here. Are there questions from you guys? You just have to tell me, then I can repeat back to everybody, and then Chris is going to answer. But Chris, you have to come here because otherwise the onliners can't hear you.
My question is about the human element. So the technical solution you share, which is fun and cool, but I'm curious about how involved were their engineers. What's the process look like to get them to adopt and say yes to your solution?
So that is at the first page. So they already are digital. So they have this business process. So there's no need. So I don't care. I'm just a technical guy who makes it possible. So I don't care about hurt feelings or something. So the digital process is already present, but it's somehow old, not good, very good made or something. So it's not about getting into Fachschaften to hop on a new process. So this is all settled ground. So I don't need to do that at this point in this project. So it's fully digital, no hurt feelings. Everyone is on board. So no problem for me there.
Another question that I have, if they now want to have some form of AI enablement in that solution, where would that plug in? Would that go into the API? Would they do that through the SAP? Or where would maybe data enhancement through an LLM take place?
Yeah, it's fully transparent. So you could put it into the global API. I could think about that because it's microservice related. So you only have one URL you are talking about. If there's some different microservices or different cloud services behind that, it's not visible to the caller. So I would think of maybe if it's a standard service, I would just connect it somewhere in the URL in the global API, or of course, if SAP is already at this point that they have AI, I don't know, to be honest, then of course, SAP is answering AI based. So yeah, it highly depends.
Which may though make the response time even slower. So that is like,
yeah, maybe. So, but for us, it doesn't matter because of this proxy in front. But of course, if you rely on really real-time data in high-performance situations, maybe SAP is not the system to choose. Sorry, SAP guys. Yeah. No, but that's not the mission of SAP. If you ask me, SAP is a different system. It's not made for putting out in the world and then say, let's do a response in 2 microseconds and 1 million times a second or something like that. If you ask me, maybe I'm wrong.
It's just a personal opinion. We don't want to go. Don't sue us. We don't have money. SAP. Absolutely, but you have to repeat the question again, Chris.
Yep. It was really slow, 5 to 10 seconds. Like, what is it now?
And so she asked, it was really slow, 5 to 10 seconds. So of course, every service answer has to be like, I'm not sure, 5 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds, something like that. So you lose because of the position where the service is located. In this case, it was Hong Kong, or 4 to 5 seconds because of the location. So if you move the service to this location, it's obviously fast because just the location changes. But if you call, of course, if you move the service to Hong Kong and you call it from Germany, and you are slow again. And if you call it vice versa, you are slow again. So you need to call from Hong Kong the Hong Kong service. So first, then it's fast. Right. That's the point at all.
So is it like real time?
Yeah, so okay. So I'm a technical guy. So if you use the real-time word, so all lamps go up. So real-time is a difficult word. And so if we are talking about game-based systems, real-time means 60 FPS or 16.6 milliseconds per frame. And real-time in this case means your front or your page, if you load it, shouldn't be loading that long. So you go on the page, it collects data because of business processes and returns in about half a second. Maybe that's okay. And then you can call it real time. I'm not sure. Or if you make a Google search, then maybe the answer, if it's below 1 second, is this real time? So it's a hard word. Real time is different for everyone. So, but I will call it real time, of course, because it's really fast.
Anything else? Good stuff. Let's get to our second talk in real time. I'm going to get Dave on stage. Dave, and you'll take it from here because I take myself off stage. You can share your screen so I can put that up here as well.
Here we go.
And there we are. So my cue to leave. Dave, all yours.
All right. Thank you, Jan. So I'm going to present a very different perspective than Chris, because as the name of my company suggests, I deal with very small organizations and typically new processes. So scaling from my perspective is much different than optimizing, millions of users. It's actually to try to extend the capabilities of a small team. So in my presentation today, I want to talk about my perspectives on answering three questions given a well-defined process. What tasks can be automated? Importantly, what tasks should be automated? And how to think about, or how I think about, how automation can augment a human task. So in my previous presentation, I advocated using visual process modeling to slow our thinking down in order to be better, faster, to help us develop a shared sort of deep understanding of our processes so we can actually design automations that are competent, that we develop the right intuition and understanding about our processes. And I introduced a visual modeling technique called business process model and notation, which is a standards-based flowchart language that is easy for everybody to understand, but it's still rigorous enough because it has a grammar and a syntax and semantics that it can actually be useful for integrating with information technology systems and designing process automation. I also talked about the modeling process in terms of a hierarchy, how we start out with sort of abstract, high-level descriptive models, iteratively developed more and more detail to get down to so-called execution models that are actually useful for us to implement our processes with or without automation. And as before, I'm going to present from the perspective of a project that's going on in real time with my friend and collaborator, Jeff Linkenbach. He's a social scientist and a consultant who's developed a personal and professional development system that he calls the Big Next. And his challenge is how to train the trainers, how to develop a cohort of expert facilitators to allow him to expand his Big Next project. So our design objectives in creating a process is how to create a process with supporting automation that enables purposeful conversations amongst participants at a variety of different scales. So not only across scales, but doing lots of different small group conversations, for example. And it led to the development of this descriptive layer process. So we've got a conversation cycle that has a preparation phase and a conversation phase, and each iteration or each instance of the conversation involves these activities: a topic selection, scheduling, a participant enrollment, who's going to be in the room, figuratively, and then a virtual asynchronous participant interviewing activity that leads into and informs a synchronous, typically Zoom-based facilitated conversation. So very high level representation of the process. A little bit more granular, if you look at the interviewing process itself, it's broken up into phases. You've got to create the interview, invite participants to execute the interview, for them to perform the interview, and then analyze the results. So taking those individual responses to interview questions, synthesizing, summarizing those, sharing those with the participants in order to inform the conversation. So at this analytical level of modeling, we have got the tasks mapped out. But that still leaves the question about how should they be done. So what tasks can be automated and what tasks should be automated. So as far as can be automated, as you no doubt are familiar, we can automate a great deal more today than we could a couple of years ago for several reasons. Certainly, large language models and the ability to use generative AI creates opportunities for automation that didn't exist before. But I think equally as important, maybe more important, is that the cost of automation, the amount of time and effort and money it takes to create automation has fallen dramatically, in part due to folks like Bryce's company, Zapier. The sort of the threshold energy of creating an automation has fallen dramatically, which just means we can economically consider opportunities to automate more. In my line of work, if I can articulate a process, chances are I can automate it. But not every task that can be automated should be automated. And what I've learned is that the degree of sort of requisite agency determines for me much of what should be automated. So when I face situations where there are lots of edge cases, lots of opportunities or needs for escalation, just generally the ability to adapt to novel circumstances, I consider that to be a task that requires a high degree of agency. Now, of course, agency is a spectrum rather than a state. So traditional automation, we don't consider to have much agency. It operates on fixed rules and preset parameters. You can incorporate some level of decision-making and business rules and edge cases, but by and large, it's not that flexible. It's very fast, it's very inexpensive at the margin, it's accurate, it has lots and lots of great attributes, but flexibility isn't necessarily one of them. On the other end of the spectrum are us humans. We're slow, we're expensive, we're error prone, but we can adapt to novel situations quickly and creatively. And then this growing middle ground of AI agents, which Bryce is going to talk about, allows sort of a new dimension of agency for us to work in. Now, the rest of my talk is going to focus on automated tasks and human task. In this particular instance, in this application with Jeff, just a few weeks ago when I made my first presentation, we had a tightly integrated, highly automated process that was quite efficient. But as soon as we went into beta testing, we discovered that notwithstanding our design, the rigor of our design, we discovered that there were need for a lot more flexibility than we'd anticipated. So in the last few weeks, we sort of unbundled much of the work that we'd done and actually inserted human in the loop interactions, which made the process less efficient, but it greatly expanded the degree to which it accommodated novel situations. So I'm going to switch to a tool called Zapier Canvas. Now, this is just a different take on that interviewing process model I showed. It's describes interview creation, the inviting of participants to conduct an interview, the interview execution, and then the interview analysis. And we can see here a representation at the task level and the workflow level. So these first tasks, add analysis record and toggle request analysis, are actually human user tasks using a tool called SmartSuite. SmartSuite is a tool that I find particularly useful when you have humans in the loop. It is kind of a no-code database product, not unlike Airtable, but with a little bit different nuance. So it looks like this. And in this case, we found it useful to have a human to be able to actually trigger the generation of an interview analysis as a function of time, to be able to parse a growing collection of interview responses by time. And when they trigger this, it triggers a zap. So if you're not familiar with Zapier, an automated workflow is called a zap. And this prepare interview analysis zap looks like this. This is pretty typical. So it's triggered when that Smart Suite toggle button is flipped. It catches a webhook, just simply some structured data from Smart Suite. It utilizes some built-in formatting functionality within Zapier, and then gets to a core of, just in these next few steps, I think are representative of a lot of the things you can do with a no-code, low-code tool like Zapier. So this first one, it retrieves the interview script, the interview questions. And what makes it no-code is that it's simply configurable using fields and drop-downs and specifying some of the data that was retrieved in that webhook. You can go retrieve the interview script for a particular interview ID. Zapier has thousands and thousands of built-in integrations, which is one of these things that helps reduce the cost of creating automation. It's fast and it's reliable. But we're not constrained by those built-in integrations because, for example, in this case, the built-in Smart Suite integration that allows us to create or retrieve multiple records was constrained to a maximum of 10 records. Well, in this application, while 10 would be fine in a lot of situations, sometimes we would want to be able to retrieve tens or hundreds or more interview transcripts. So that's fine. All we did was create a little code step, just a code snippet that directly accessed the Smart Suite API that allows us to retrieve up to 1,000 records. Next is a pretty standard use of API, and that is that we've got a predetermined prompt. So we write it once, it can use it many, many times. That grabs the interview script, grabs the answers to the questions in the script, and then tells the LLM how to analyze it, summarize it, and report on that analysis. So I find most of the times I'm using AI, it's not that the AI is fully automating a process or a workflow, it's performing a summarization, analysis, synthesis step within a workflow. And it does that very, very well. And for our purposes, fast. Then, as you probably know, the output from LLMs is typically in Markdown format, converting that to HTML, and then putting it back into Smart Suite, which makes it available to incorporate into an HTML email. So that's I think a classic use of just automation. It doesn't require any real agency. We know what the workflow is. We need to be able to execute it reliably and quickly and inexpensively. But if we go back to the very beginning of this, what kicks this off is a human task, formulate the interview questions. And it goes to a very real issue. The purpose of these interviews is to help participants engage in self-reflection and to draw out information from them via audio that will inform the live conversation. So if you ask bad questions, you're going to get bad responses. And it doesn't matter how efficient this process is, it's not going to achieve its objective. So we need human domain experts to actually formulate a handful of really good questions to make the process work. But when we do that, what we recognized is that that can be perceived by a facilitator, by a host, as a project. And as soon as things in the realm of projects, they become subject to procrastination and friction. So we asked, all right, this differentiation between automation and human tasks is a false dichotomy, because we have the opportunity increasingly to use special purpose automation to help assist the human in performing their task. So in this case, we generated this interview question generator. And again, this is a case, and I'm going to elaborate upon this in my next talk, how, because the barriers to automation are getting so low, it's economical for us to create web applications, in this case, that are very useful to a relatively small number of people. We're not building SaaS platforms here. We're just creating a tool that, in this case, Jeff's facilitators can use to help speed the creation of good interview questions. So for example, let's just grab one of these example topics. If I can get my mouse to work. I wish I knew how to improve team communication. And they can then select from one of several different questioning frameworks, design thinking, Socratic method. Let's pick design thinking. And then using AI, generate some questions. And in this situation, our expectation of AI is pretty modest. We're not asking the AI to perform the task. What we want from this AI-enabled tool is to help accelerate the human task by creating a pretty good first draft. And with a quick first draft, it's much more likely that the human task is going to be done faster and probably better than if left to their own devices. So next time I'm going to come back and dig into this issue more, because I think it's a big deal. The ability to use very bespoke tools to enhance agentic behavior. So what I've walked through today is really a quick example of the development progression that I find myself using in the context of my work. I start with modeling the process, making our understanding of a new or existing process explicit so we can iterate it, improve it, and have a solid foundation for automation. Next, I'll automate what can be and should be automated to the extent possible with the built-in no-code Zapier integrations, which is a very large library. I can do most of my work there. Keeps it fast. Where it's not possible, I'll extend it with some code steps. And nobody should be afraid of code steps anymore. And then finally, increasingly, when there are tasks that need to be done with some sort of agency, whether it's an AI agent or a human agent, more and more we're creating these bespoke custom tools to augment the agentic tasks. So I think in some, focus on getting your understanding of your process right, be thoughtful about what you automate, and then remember that even human tasks can be, in many cases, augmented or accelerated or made a little bit easier with some bespoke development.
Thank you so much, Dave. That was awesome. I really like that. So, questions from the audience once again. While you may still be thinking, unless you have something for me straight away, one question that I want to ask you, you mentioned you tried out to fully automate it, and then you basically had to revert it because in realistic application there were some drawbacks, and you acknowledged the necessity for human-based behavior, for human behavior. Did that exercise inform you to an extent where you say, okay, if you have that set of circumstances, a human is the better choice? Because just pressing a button, retrieve interview questions, I guess we can automate that. But maybe it's iteration, or maybe it's what you said, the speed in which I have to acknowledge different circumstances and reframe my actions. But where do you think is a quick acid test for figuring out in a business process that the human do that?
Well, again, I think it comes back to the degree of agency that's necessary. And what we heard from Jeff and the people that were using the system was they wanted to have greater control over the sending of messages, for example, hence those toggling that, it was readily something that we could readily automate. But what we found was that the timing of messaging, the timing of the progression of the sequence of tasks in the overall process is something that the human facilitators wanted better control over. And it varied from conversation to conversation. So rather than trying to fully automate all the different combinations and permutations of conditions, we found it was just easier to have a human in the loop, just to be able to review something, okay it, say now's the time. They just wanted that kind of flexibility. I would imagine that over time we may re-automate some of this, but initially that tightly coupled approach that I took initially was too restrictive, and we just needed to back off, build in more flexibility, at least at this early stages, until collectively we learned more and more about how we want to use this interviewing and conversation process.
Which likely is going to be a solid process for AI implementation in those, let's say, HR-related tasks generally, but certainly also across other systems. So you maybe want to start out, especially with new projects, with a tightly run process, fully automated, and then check for human involvement necessity rather than the other way around. Try to base it all on humans and then see where you can augment. One question I have is regarding your use of, I guess that was Replit at the end, where you build this question finder or question builder. Really like that. I want to get a copy of the source code, please, because we can really use that for our panel discussions as well. But I was wondering, you said rightfully that humans may take this definition of questions as a project becomes procrastinated because it looks like work. On the other hand, that what looks like work is the expertise. I really liked your statement, and we're going to cut that humans are prone to error, slow, and expensive. I guess that's an interesting description of our race. And I would agree with all of those. I guess we have many more things, and I know that you know that too. But now let's say you have somebody who says, I am the question consultant. I built my entire life on doing that, but much slower, and this is also what I charge for. Is there a hesitancy in the adoption of such services because the trainers felt like, look, this is actually doing the work that I define my value on?
We'll see. I think that at least with my collaborators, they understand that what is valuable is being able to identify good questions in context. So notwithstanding our foibles as human beings, we also have a much deeper and richer understanding of context and have real domain expertise that large language models can't emulate, especially, so I heard somebody say, without a large amount of language, you can't have a large language model. And domain experts, by definition, are kind of the pointy end of the spear. There's not a lot of language around real deep domain expertise. So we need those domain experts to be able to identify, to be able to differentiate amongst what's a good question, what's a bad question. What the LLMs can do is just start the process that much faster. I think ultimately the human shows his or her value by being able to consistently identify what are great questions. It's like a excellent journalist doing interviews. We can get sort of B+ grade questions out of an LLM, and I think that's worth doing because it takes seconds to do that. We rely on the expert to go from a B+ to an A+, and that's where you compete at that margin. So people who want to compete, who want to be the best in their fields, I think are going to be able to utilize these tools more efficiently than others.
I guess the more relevant it is, we train our children to be master iterators and master reactions to changing circumstances. In startup land, we always say adversity is a privilege. So this actually becomes a completely new training ground now for everybody who wants to live and be successful and compete in the future.
Yeah.
How long did the process take from the client first reaching out to Dave and then to where we are?
So Dave, our guest was asking how fast the process went from client reaching out to where you are right now.
It's tough to say. I mean, we've had background conversations about this for a couple of years, but it was at a very high level. It was probably end of January, early February, we decided to move forward. So the first iteration, which I shared or I hinted at in our presentation a couple, 3 weeks ago, that took a couple of months. I had to completely re-architect it. But given the previous work, the second iteration took me about 3 days. So it pays off to understand the process because rebuilding it was much, much faster.
All good?
Would you say that it's rather useful to automate like job vacancies for blue collar workers, like to automate interviews if you have really simple tasks to fulfill? And when it comes to like more complex job duties, then you really need the human factor in the interview?
So I hope I can repeat that properly, but basically the question is, does it make sense if you have like a simple task employee that may be doing simple tasks in a blue collar environment, then you can fully automate because the questions don't have to be as thoughtful than you have to be in a white collar environment where maybe there's a lot of knowledge work and the questions need to become a bit more deeper.
Maybe, but I suspect that even with blue collar work, depending on the context, what a worker does with the knowledge may vary situationally. So if it's kind of an assembly line context where you're just doing the same task over and over and over again, probably it's more susceptible to productive automation. But if it's more of a bespoke application, then still I think the task is how to automate the routine, how to automate the familiar in order to allow the human being to apply that in a specific context. So I'm not sure I would make a hard line between blue collar work and white collar work. I think it's more about how much flexibility and application is required.
Does that make sense? All right, Dave, I think I have 10 more questions for you, but we'll see you again in just a couple of weeks. And then I'm just going to take my time and ask them all. Okay. But now I don't want to leave Bryce waiting much longer and add you to the stage straight away. Bryce, thank you so much for your patience. I guess all there is to do is to get us off stage, and it's going to be so interesting because now we focus on the degree of agency, what is required, when can we have automation, AI agency, and the human, and that center point, the AI agency. That is exactly what you're the expert in. So I'm really looking forward to learn even more on that.
Yes, Jan, thank you. And yeah, Dave, it's amazing what a great segue all of what you chatted about is to what I'll go into. Obviously, we're going to dive a little bit more into the weeds and look at this very practically, sort of hands-on. There'll be some moments where you can actually, get out your phone, interact with this, or on a laptop, you can actually build along. For anyone watching this recording later, hopefully you walk away actually with an agent that works. But the place I'm going to start is sort of visualizing what Dave was talking about in this sort of degrees of agency. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. All right. So if you haven't seen it already, today, I'm so glad, Jan, you had this going today, because Zapier just released sort of our AI orchestration platform. There's a bunch of new functionality out there. And one big piece of that functionality is to be able to bring agents and zaps together so that, any sort of task that you need to automate with AI or with a traditional Zap, you can under Zapier's roof, and it's super exciting and very powerful. So I'm going to show you this one slide, and then we're going to get into the product, and you'll be able to see everything firsthand. So this is what I call the AI automation spectrum. And on one side, you have determinism, or basically the way I like to think about it is you are stripping a process of its free will, and so that it happens the same way every time, and it couldn't happen any other way. That's the goal. And so that's what a lot of what Dave was showing. Traditional zaps in the Zapier world, that's what it's called. You have a process, it needs to be repeated every time. Then on the other side, and I'll step us through there, but on the other side is inference, and that's where there is more autonomy on the software, the agent, to make decisions. So we're going to step our way that way. More towards the deterministic side, but headed that direction, is what's called an AI Zap. This is actually what Dave was showing with his Zap, because it had an AI step. There's a discrete, very determined process, steps through, but there might be a piece where you can leverage the power of AI and these large language models to summarize things, extract information, even draft content, or do a lot of the other things LLMs are really good at. And so that's where you're kind of introducing one little piece there that is a little bit more creative and fluid, where you're using the power of AI. The next piece is the agentic Zap. This is a newer piece that you're able to do now in Zapier, where you have a deterministic process, step by step. You want some of that structure, those guardrails, but within that automation, within that Zap, you now have a place where an agent that you've built can be inserted in to take even more action, give more autonomy, decide kind of how to accomplish something, and then after it's finished, continue on with the rest of the steps. So you can kind of mix and match all these things. And of course, on the far end, you have the full inferential piece is the agent, where it's working on its own. It has access to data and knowledge and all those great tools. And you can build that as sort of its standalone thing, an AI teammate that works for you. And then if you go, I guess what's not on this slide is the human, which probably would be a good addition, but it would be sort of off the charts here, right? Further past inference. to be able to be full creative mode, but also, like Dave mentioned, slow, prone to error, and all that good stuff. So when it comes to the world of automation and AI, this is sort of what you're working with right here in this spectrum. So now, when you combine all of these, and I'm going to show you every single one here with an illustration and actually something we built. So we're going to go into Zapier. Don't feel like you need to follow along right now, like in your own browser. I'll tell you when you can do that in a minute, but you can you kind of watch this piece here. So here I'm in Zapier, where you have all these products to build lots of amazing things, including agents and a whole bunch of other stuff that I'll just lightly touch on as we go throughout today. But the very first thing we'll do is just build a traditional classic Zap, your classic automation. So in Zapier, you can actually type out what you might want here, and it'll build it for you. So it's really pretty easy to do. So I'm thinking about an onboarding process, pretty classic automation where there's a series of steps. Like, so when a new hire form is submitted, so maybe someone on your team's like, we've hired someone, great. You fill out this form. We want to create a welcome email and send it in Gmail, a welcome message to the team in Slack. We're going to add them to the new hire checklist interface that we create for them, so they have that for their first day. And we're going to notify the hiring manager via Slack DM. I mean, you can type out, whatever you might want here. And from this place, it will create what it thinks you might need from a traditional Zap, a traditional automation. It's going to give you every single step. We're going to let AI think for a second, look at the 8,000 or so apps that it could choose from. I've indicated which apps that I want to use, and some are a little bit more open-ended. So we'll see what it shows up. All right, great. Form submission created with Zapier interfaces, so you can create forms directly in Zapier. Creates a draft email, sends that message, creates a user for that checklist, and lastly, sends another message. This looks great. Super straightforward, really easy. It steps you through kind of how to configure this, but now you have this traditional automation ready to be configured and turned on. We won't go into all that detail right now. But this is linear based. I want this to happen every single time. I want to say exactly what this channel message should say. It might be customized for the specific person, but I can map those fields in. It's going to work every time, same way. Love it. All right. So now we're going to move on. We're going to move from this traditional Zap to an AI Zap, where we've inserted an AI step. So the use case is a media team. It's going to get a bunch of inbound messages from all over the place, media tips, all these things, and they want to bring that in, categorize it correctly, make sure the right team is categorized so that they can notify that team. So it's a whole system. I'll show you what that system looks like sort of towards the end, but there's a piece of it, which is an AI Zap, where it's just like that traditional Zap, where we have a linear process. There's a new message that comes in. It's a media tip. It goes and gets a list of categories, list of active teams, a bunch of information, right? And then AI by Zapier is an app that you can use to connect to any of the LLMs, or out of the box, Zapier provides GPT-4o Mini from OpenAI. You can connect your own account, but that makes it super easy. And then you're generating a prompt to do those things I talked about, right? It's going to take the message that comes in, the subject, the message body. It's going to pull in those categories, potential teams to assign it to. And then I tell it to go ahead and distill a summary, extract keywords, find the appropriate category, all these things that LLMs are so good at, including providing like a confidence score for the categorization. How confident is the AI that the category is the right one? So it's going to tell me that as well. It's going to output all these fields. And when we look at this, when it's actually gone through and done all of that AI work for you, it'll update in the table. So I can just open up the table. I can show you the output and what that looks like. So this media team will have this table to reference of all the messages coming in, and all the pieces here, the AI summary, the tags, the category, the confidence score, the urgency, the routed team, those are all filled out by the AI step in that Zap. Super powerful still, right? But we're still just looking at this AI Zap. The next piece is the agentic Zap, or the agent. We're going to jump to the agent because looking at how the agent works will kind of allow us to come full circle back to this sort of combining the two worlds with this agentic Zap. So we're going to go to agents, and we're going to build something from scratch here. And the thing that you can take away from agents, and I think this also plays so well into what Dave was talking about, the more and more you think about agents, build with agents, the more you realize that delegation is the name of the game and data is the name of the game. And you'll realize that there's so much about your work maybe you weren't clear about that you need to get clear about, so that you can find the points where bringing an agent in gives you the highest leverage on your workflow. So there's a whole lot of work that goes on, as we saw with Dave, that will make building an agent more impactful. That's not going to just make it something you build and then regret later, or you waste time doing it. Now, with something new, though, it's helpful to go in and spend some time building. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to start with a very simple agent so you can understand how it works, and then we'll build something a little bit more complex. Let's see if I can join. Looks like I'd have to connect to YouTube to join the chat. So I don't know if Jan, at some point, we can send this link I just sent over, but if you go to, you can even just Google Zapier agents and sign up there, or go to zapier.com/agents. Super easy to sign up. You can do that right now if you want and build alongside me. Or, of course, you can always watch this recording or build it directly after. But you can totally do this. It's so simple. You're going to be surprised at how easy it is to build. And that's the other big benefit of agents, is the speed to build. And we'll see what that looks like as I build this out. All right. So when you're in Zapier, we are going to navigate to the sidebar, and you'll see agents, and we'll click that. We're going to go ahead and create a brand new agent. And the use case here is, hopefully everyone can relate to it. You get a lot of cold emails. That's fine. Maybe a lot of them are relevant. Most of the time, though, I want those to at least be in a separate labeled part of my inbox, so it doesn't crowd out the emails I know I do need to get to right off the bat. So this is a very simple cold email categorizer. So in agents, you just give it a name. You can always change this later. And when we're here, we can see that it looks very much like, like ChatGPT or something like that. You've got the main chat here. You've got different chats. They're going to line up on the left-hand side. And you could, chat with your agent just like you would with an AI. But the real power is configuring what we call behaviors. And these behaviors, you can create maybe 10 or more behaviors under one agent roof. And so this could graduate from just a cold email categorizer to a whole email inbox agent that categorizes cold emails and does a whole bunch of other stuff with my email. But for now, we're going to keep it narrow focused. We could type out what we want to do, and it will help you build it. But for this, I'm going to skip this step and show you how simple this can be if you have an idea like this cold email agent. It works very similar to a traditional Zap in that there is a trigger. The agent needs to know when to wake up and get to work. And so when you add a trigger, you can make it on demand. So when you're just chatting with your agent, you can, click a button and have it do this work. You can schedule it to happen daily, weekly, whenever. Trigger via a Zap, and this is the brand new piece that we'll show in a minute. So have it kind of embedded in a deterministic automation, or you can trigger from any of the 8,000 different apps we have, which makes it extremely flexible. So for this one, we're searching Gmail, and I'm going to wake this agent up anytime there's a new email in my inbox. So every single new email is going to come in here. And of course, I already have my account authenticated. You would have to step through and connect your account. So it's authenticated here. But once you have that trigger set up, this agent's going to wake up every single new email that comes in. Now, this is where it gets really easy and fun. You type out what you want it to do. And you'll see with agents, it's going to decide things for you. So when I say, look at the new email, and if it's a cold sales outreach email to me from some individual, then remove the inbox label and label it cold. That's all I'm going to say. It's that simple. The agent's going to decide. So it makes a decision on whether the email is a cold sales outreach email. I don't give it any examples. I don't say anything else. It's smart enough to make that call. Maybe at some point it might not get something right. I don't know, but I can give it feedback. At the beginning, this is what I'm going to put up. I have this actually working for me, and it works about 99% of the time, which is incredible. The next piece here is you're going to give it tools. So obviously it needs to be able to actually remove the label and add a label in Gmail. And so it could visit a website, Google search, be a live browser, like it can like pull things from websites. Or what we're going to do now is we're going to add a tool. And you'll see on these tools, there's tons of them, but there's also occasionally these, optimized for AI search pieces. We're going to get to that in a bit. One of the superpowers of agents is the knowledge source and data, and how it can easily look at massive amounts of data and pull from that. And that's helpful, right? If you have brand guidelines that you want to apply, or you're looking at a large table of video statistics and you want to understand how well they're performing for a weekly report. There's so much you can do. We're going to just keep it simple, right? For Gmail, we are going to remove the inbox label, right? Remove label from email. And we also want it to add a label to the email, which is the cold label. This agent is now done. The coolest part is I didn't have to fill out anything. When I click in to look at the settings, remove label from email, the message is, let your agent select a value for this field. The labels to remove. Let your agent decide what value or what label to actually remove, because I put it in the instructions. It has the context. It should know how to do that. Same with adding the label, right? I don't need to make sure it adds the label cold. I did need to make sure that label was created so it has access to it, but I can let the agent decide. If for whatever reason I want to add a little bit of that deterministic flavor and I want to get specific about something, I can if I want. So there's a little bit of that flexibility. I could say, hey, make sure it's adding that cold label. But for this, again, the agent's going to have the context it needs. I don't need to do a thing. So I click save, and this is set up. So if you're following along, you literally could build this in about a minute, and hopefully it's helpful for you. There is a free agents plan with all this access. You don't have to pay to get extra access. It's just based on activities, and this will run for you. We're going to wait on the behavior because I'm going to show you how to test things and what it looks like in something a little bit more complex. Because like I said, you're going to want to use more tools than this. You want to use things like data sources or web searches. And that's what we're going to do next. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at major tech companies. And you can sort of assume this is like a lead intake process. You got new leads, new companies coming in, and you want to do some research about them, fill out some information. And this table is going to be capturing all that. So, I have an example record here we'll test with, but company names and founded date, headquarters, CEO, website, revenue, market cap, all this information. I could add in more fields if I want, just whatever I would possibly want to get in categorized for any new company I add to this table. When we go back into agents, we're going to just build out a new agent here. And we're going to call this, we'll just call it the lead agent. Start from scratch. Now, you don't have to follow along here in your own instance because it does take, setting up a table and all that. So feel free to just, watch as I work through this. But for this agent, we're going to have it do one main thing. And for this main thing we're going to have it do is to go use a web search and research the company. We need to wake it up. So we're going to add a trigger. And this time we're going to use Zapier tables, because that's the piece here that we're going to wake the agent up from. We'll click anytime there's a new record. So there's going to be a new record coming in to this table. We do have to tell it, of course, what table that we're looking at to trigger from. So this is the major tech companies table. I'll click save. Perfect. New records are going to come in. So now I type out what I want. Again, very simple to do. For the new company, research the details and update the other fields in the table. That's it. I don't have to list out what I want it to research. I don't even have to say Google search here. It'll know to do a Google search. But if you ever do want to be explicit about doing a Google search versus something else, you can explicitly add that tool in, but it will automatically have that tool available to research. The only piece here is that I need to make sure it has the ability to update the records. So kind of zooming out, anytime you're building an agent, I remember I mentioned you're going to get really good at the art of delegation. So if you did have an assistant or someone working for you and you're delegating work to them, you need to make sure they also have the right access. The same applies for agents, where we're making sure it has the right access to do the work that we're telling it to do. So for this, we're going to have it update the fields in that table. So the tool is going to be tables. Here we see it. And we're going to have it update a record. We do want to make sure that it has the right table selected. It probably could figure this part out, but I do want to make sure it's not going to go update any other record. But for the specific record ID, it should have that. And now it has, the list of all of the fields that come in from that Zapier table. And again, we're letting the agent generate the value for those fields. We click save. That's it. We're going to test this so you can see what it looks like. This is really cool in agents. This testing screen, you can have a conversation with it. So if test data comes in and you actually want to change that test data or have the agent kind of pretend it's different test data, you can literally say, pretend this is for the company, Apple or whatever you want to put in there. And it can work with you. It's dynamic. And then if you have feedback, it will automatically record that in the instructions for you. So testing is dynamic. For this one, we can see what it's thinking. This, of course, would happen automatically if we had this turned on. We're just testing. The new record comes in. It saw Microsoft, and now it's doing those Google searches. It's updating all the information it found about Microsoft into the table. Now, there could be companies you put in here that aren't major tech companies. Maybe there's not great information. Maybe there's no public information, like revenue numbers aren't always public, right? So in that case, we could tell the agent like, hey, for those types of companies, just skip the process. Otherwise, it's hard to say exactly what will come through, right? But for this looks great for testing purposes. I'll approve it, and we can see that it will update right here. All that information. Amazing. So we would turn something like this on, and then every new record that comes in, we would update it. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to have this run. I've got sort of another agent that's working to do this as well. What I'm going to have everyone else here do, anyone watching, Dave, Jan, Chris, anyone wants to jump on their phone, they can go to founders.zapier.app/form. founders.zapier.app/form. Type that into your phone, on your browser, wherever you're at. This is a Zapier interface that I created. It's very simple. It has a form where you can input a company name. And this form is directly tied to that table that I had created, the major tech companies table. So anything you put in this form, so please keep it safe, will show up in that table, and the agent will wake up to go research the information. You'll see all the things that you input down in the table below, so you can actually reference it if you want. But go ahead and fill some stuff out if you'd like. I'll even put in Slack and maybe Zapier. There we go. I don't think our revenue numbers are public, so we'll see what happens there. So right now I can see some things flowing in. Awesome. Feel free to actually go and fill it out. founders.zapier.app/form. Test it out, and we're going to see those results live. So as you all are kind of filling those out and we let those run, I'm going to jump to the last bit here and we'll kind of wrap things up. The agentic Zap. So we saw the agent, we saw AI Zap, and the traditional Zap. Now we're going to put them all together. And we're going to introduce data sources to agents as well, so you can see how that works. So looking at this Zap, this is an agentic Zap tied to anytime a company is filled out in that form that you're filling out and added to the table. That is going to trigger this automation, this agentic automation. A new form is going to come in. It's going to do some work like finding the company in HubSpot. If the company already exists, there's a filter there. Filters are really handy with deterministic processes, right? Filters might not work quite like you would want in a deterministic way. Great use case to be able to use filters in a Zap. Then you see two other bits here. These are calling agents. It's triggering an agent to research the company and update the table, just like I showed you. And then it's also calling an agent that looks back the last 2 weeks of my Zoom meetings and sees if that new company that came in, that new lead, if that company has been mentioned in any of my meetings, and then pull the context from those meetings if it's been mentioned and send me a DM about it. So you can imagine you got your website running on your website, or you've got your form running on your website, new leads coming in. You just want to get notified when there's a new lead that comes in that you've talked about. And so you can go in, I don't know, do what you would need with that information, but a helpful piece where agents can tap into a data source like Zoom and actually look at all that. So when we look at this in agents, I'll show you what these agents look like. We saw the first one. I'll go to this one here. The first one is that company research one, where it's researching all the details about the company, updating the record. The only difference here is the trigger is triggering via a Zap. That's all I have to set up. I don't have to say which Zap, just a Zap, so that it becomes available for me when I'm building out the Zap here and choosing which agent, which behavior to run. Jumping around here a little bit. The next piece is that company mentions in the last 2 weeks. Again, this is triggered via a Zap. And what I've done here is added Zoom as a data source. Like I said earlier, when you look at all the tools you can add, you'll see a lot of these have that icon. That means you can add it as a data source. You can still find records easily, and AI can help you find records. But if you want to look at the swath of large information and have the AI kind of swim through it and pull out what's relevant, that's where that data integration icon really comes in handy. So for Zoom, I mean, I could do this for HubSpot, Airtable, Notion. There's so many pieces here. Zoom is pretty sweet. Of course, I already added it in, but you add the data integration for Zoom, and now you get access to those Zoom recordings that are in the cloud. So I say, hey, go find any mention of the company in meetings in the last 2 weeks, return the context about what we spoke about. That's all we're doing. So we're really just using this agent to tap into data sources. There's a lot more I could have it do. I mean, I could have it actually send me that Slack message. So instead of the Zap doing it, I could have the agent. So there's so much flexibility in how you set something up. That's why using Canvas, and we'll kind of end at that piece with Canvas, visualizing your process and what goes into what is so critical, so that you can understand where pieces flow, what's using what. Really important. All right, so those agents are being called here. And if we could look at this, the behavior, right? And I just put in, what company was filled out in the form, and the information it might need to output, all those enriched fields, etc. So now let's see here. When I'm looking at my Slack, I'm seeing some cool information coming in, which is neat. It's because I had a Zoom call yesterday where I talked about a whole lot of different companies, and so I think the agent's recognizing that I've talked about them a lot. So I'll show you that here in a second. When we go back into the table, I can view it from that interface that you all have access to. We can start seeing all this information filled out. Amazing. So good. So the agent is working for me. And Zapier, I guess when I put that in, it's like, hey, no, we're not going to enrich data on Zapier for some reason. So I'll have to look into why it stopped for Zapier. But hey, looks great, coming in, amazing. And then I can, I'll screenshot this from my Slack to show you when those leads come in. Here we go. They give me, when they were mentioned, all the details, of course, and then context around, when we were talking about said company, which is pretty cool. So yeah, yesterday, in my Zoom meeting, I talked about Apple, integrating with Apple. That was a call I had with myself just for this demo. So. All right, super cool seeing that work. Thank you all for filling out the form. We're going to end with the last piece, and we'll take questions and whatever else we can get to here. But that original use case I mentioned, where you're using an AI Zap, the media team has inbound messages coming in. There's a lot to that whole process, and so anytime you have a process like that, and we saw a little bit about Canvas with Dave, but mapping it out in Canvas is so critical. So here is sort of that inbound message router. This will be a template available pretty soon. This is the template that I'm building currently, and so with it, you can see all of the inbound messages that come in for a media team. They're coming from email, forms, and lots of other places. They're all routed into one table, and that one table is then responsible for triggering out this AI zap. And that zap is what we saw early on. It's this one right here, where the zap's categorizing and doing all that work for the table so that that media team can understand the category, what team should be assigned, etc. And then from there, other zaps are actually routing the messages to the right team. And so they have a zap that's going to send an email out to that team or a Slack message in that team's channel. And it's going to include a link finally to an interface where that team can log in, see all of their messages, and manage sort of what status they're in, whether they're working on it or whether it's archived, complete, etc. And we can even see, let's see here. Let's see if I can just like navigate to it. Let's see here. So just opening up this interface that was built for that media team to log in, and they see all of their messages here, which team owns it, Kanban view to drag things over into different statuses. So with something like this, you can start seeing, what was released today, this AI orchestration platform. There's all this stuff you can do with AI in Zapier that allows you to do amazing systems and processes once you've kind of figured the process out and where you're going to plug in humans, where you're going to plug in agents and zaps. And so there's people like Marcus. We love Marcus from Remote. He built an IT help desk using AI and automation. And it's a huge process. And there's this template here that goes into all of the details about like how it works and all the different zaps that are created to make it a reality, the pieces of the puzzle that use AI, etc. So teams are getting those work all that work done in Zapier, and it's super fun to build. So I hope you get in there, definitely try it out. But that is all I've got, Jan, for today. So I don't know if there was any questions I could help answer.
So that was quite the content drop. So let me have people digest it. And in the meantime, I do have a couple of questions straight away. So let's start with something that may be difficult, but Zapier has a history of connecting software to software. We've just seen that. Yeah. How are you thinking in terms of hardware? Because I could also say, look, if I have a door device and I see it's my daughter coming in, actually recognize family based on these pictures I provide to the Zap, and then it just automatically grants access. I could design an entire smart home with Zapier. Do you already have workflows for hardware-based triggers?
Great question. If it has an API, then yes, because you could take that and work with it. I don't know off the top of my head which pieces of hardware have the API and have created an integration with Zapier. Of course, you could create your own integration and run with that, but I'm pretty laser focused on digital world, or at least most of the products that we're focused on or develop at Zapier are in that cloud for now.
So for all the guys coming in from the Builders Tech Club and all the tradespeople, get your minds rolling and maybe also come up with some workflows that may be interesting.
Yeah.
Second question, you're talking with the Germans. The German is all about the security. So how secure is my data?
Yeah. I mean, how secure is my data? There's a huge, lots of nuance to that. Of course, this is, we're SOC 2 compliant at Zapier. We've got like all of what you would need from, that perspective as far as, cloud security is concerned. And then I think a lot of the questions that come up is like, with AI specifically, is my data being used to train anything? And so with Zapier, if you're using something like OpenAI, it's up to OpenAI and your relationship with them and what license you have with them. But if it does come through Zapier, there's two things. One is there is a I forget what the name of it is, but it removes like any personal information from the data, and then there's also like a full opt out that you can make, or anyone can make, to make sure that data is not specifically training anything on Zapier. So yeah, I'm not a security expert. I don't think I have all the answers. I know there are resources I can certainly send if anyone has a question about it, though.
Wonderful. So I think that's good enough, because at the end of the day, it's software. Yeah, we don't have messages in the chat. If you do want to post some messages, so questions that are coming in through YouTube is, hi. So Dave, are you familiar with Yellowstone? Guess, Dave, we're going to get you back, but I mean, this may actually be a geographical question. So Nuno, hey, Nuno, regards to Dubai. What's the difference between AI by Zapier and an AI agent?
Yeah. So thinking back to that spectrum, AI by Zapier is more or less, you can think of it as the equivalent to putting ChatGPT into your Zap. And so it's going to have all that capability. So AI by Zapier just is more or less like a wrapper for that, to make it really easy to work with AI within a Zap as a specific step. Agents, on the other hand, are going to have the unique ability to look at sort of the dynamic data that you have connected through it, and be able to be configured via that text-based prompt. And so when I think about agents, I am thinking specifically about Zapier agents. I know there's lots of different agent platforms out there. They all define things different. But there is a bit of a gray area, like I said, when it comes to how autonomous you want the agent to be. I mean, you could go into Zapier agents and create something that you would normally create with Zapier Zap and an AI step. You could still do that with agents. Agents, but have that like extra ability to say like, hey, when I get new leads that come in, send me a Slack DM if you think they're important. Like really vague stuff that the AI is going to have to make a decision about it. And you can, over time, give it what it needs to make a better decision. But again, it's like an assistant on your team, being able to choose when or when not to use tools, instead of you programming that in when exactly it's going to use something, or when exactly it's going to deem someone important, etc. So there's that gray area that you get to lean into with agents that makes it a little different.
I have two more questions on my side. Any questions from the audience here locally? So my two questions are, Bryce, I guess when you started introducing agents, I was thinking like, okay, I got to do that, and that. Yesterday, when I spoke to someone who I invited for today's event, said, well, yeah, all that AI stuff, I think I need to lock myself up for 2 weeks and then learn everything there is to know, and then just, then execute from there on. Or I hear of teams that run 1 week offsites to talk AI. Do you have a best practice adoption advice? While I let you think on that question, typically my answer is to say, have one automation per week. One thing that annoys you, one thing that you think you can be automating. Don't do all these offsites. Don't do big projects that actually may not come to fruition. Do one thing a week, get consistent, and start with really mundane tasks and get trained that way. But you are a way better expert in that than I am, so I hope you have a better answer.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's not a one size fit all. But here's my take on it, and I'll show you this. I'm sharing my screen. I don't know if you want to pull it up. I don't know if you know what this is. Do you know what this is, Jan?
I would say it's the Hindenburg on impact, but I'm not sure.
Almost. So this is called the Langley aerodrome. and I promise this ties in. This is Samuel Langley. It was like the race for flight back, in 1900. Everyone's trying to figure out flying, and he raised $50,000, which in today's money is like a whole bunch of money, to research, theorize how to fly, and then build something, and then do a one test into the river. And of course, it crashed, failed. He read all the books, all that good stuff. But then you have the Wright brothers, who only spent $1,000 of their own money, but their whole mission was to do as many tests as humanly possible. So they flew and tested their airplane over 1,000 times, which is way more than Samuel Langley or anyone else. And this quote is what I live and breathe by when it comes to agents. If you're looking for perfect safety, like, you could sit on a fence, watch the birds, but if you really wish to learn, you got to mount the machine, become acquainted with its tricks by actual trial. So I think at the heart of anyone, any advice you hear, like, they realize, like, hey, AI is a new thing. You can sit back and think about it, but the reality is, like, it makes everyone a builder, and the way to get good at it is to go and build. Like, it's that simple. Does that look like a one-day workshop? Does it look like taking, cold emails out of your inbox and starting there? Does it look like over a week choosing one thing to build? Whatever it is, get your hands dirty, get off of LinkedIn, and just try one little thing, and it builds from there. So I think the format is up for, debate on what's most effective. I think a lot of times it can help when you're wanting to make a team impact, to do like a hackathon or something like that. But that's my general advice on how to do it.
So I actually do have a few more questions, but I found those to be the most perfect closing words. So I'm going to leave those for a round two. Bryce, I hope you come back and show us more workflows. And since I want to prove no questions goes unanswered in the Innovation Gym at the Founders Fight Club, Dave, do you know Yellowstone?
I know Yellowstone. I live just north of there.
And that answers that, Ina. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. I hope you had some fun. I hope you enjoyed yourself on site in Munich as well. And I'll see you all in, just a couple of weeks. 22nd of April, we have our next session. Can't wait. And we'll definitely build some agents and workflows and Zaps until then. Thank you so much, everybody.